When on a sort of tagline of the film, it's we all have worth regardless of where we are on the spectrum. Sometimes people with disabilities can just be sort of disregarded before they've even had a chance. A film should be two things really. It should be, first of all, entertaining, because that's why you're pushed play in the first place. And secondly, you should take something away with you. You know, you should feel like you've learned something, or maybe you can see yourself in a character, or you might think, well, next time a situation like that comes about my way, or maybe I'll handle that differently, because it should just sort of sit with you for a while.
Rick Stanton, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you doing today?
Very good, very good. Thank you for having me.
I am honestly so excited for this conversation. We've just been speaking off camera and off mic about the film Spectrum, which you are the writer and director of. And honestly, I'm so excited to go for a little debrief, deep dive, everything about the film, because I watched a big old snippet of it today. And when I say big snippet, it was like 20 minutes of it. And I found it one of the most interesting and thought-provoking films in terms of how it portrays disability that I think I might have ever seen. And that's quite a big statement for me.
Yeah, that was kind of always the intention, really. Like in the film basically delves into what life is like for an adult with autism. And the lead character is actually played by my brother, who has autism. And one of the reasons was because we wanted to sort of show the truth of life rather than how it typically is portrayed. I think autism's often sort of seen on television as almost cute or childlike. And I wanted to depict how my brother's life actually is, where he's just like everybody else and has the same emotional range and troubles and issues just like everybody does, but just has a slightly different outlook on the world.
Yeah. And so that's actually really perfect that that's where you started, because I was going to ask you what inspired you to start this project. But actually what I am going to ask you is, when you first thought of Spectrum, how has it evolved from your first thought to what it is now? So like, how did that happen, and what was that process like?
So it's kind of interesting. So basically in the film, there's a very dramatic scene at the end when, to spoil it a little bit, the lead character witnesses somebody being brutally attacked. And with that moment, that was the first thing I wrote, because that actually happened to me about 15 years ago. I was walking home from a pub in East London, and then I came across a woman screaming, and she had all blood over her face. And I didn't see who attacked her, but when I was trying to help her, she was pushing and screaming me to go away. And then the police arrived and put me in handcuffs. So first of all, I wanted to write that into a film somehow. And then I started to think, what if this event had happened to my brother who has autism? How would he reacted? Would he have reacted any different? And what would be the events to lead up to that moment?
Yeah. I kind of love that, because you've taken something that actually has happened and then trying to translate it and also explain, not necessarily explain, but like look at it through a different lens, which I think is where like a lot of great artistry comes from. And so when you were filming Spectrum, and the way that it's filmed is also quite special as well, isn't it? Because as a viewer, I actually found it quite a jarring watch, and like jarring in the sense of that it wasn't like it wasn't like TV. I wasn't just watching like, you know, the soaps or like anything on Netflix. It's so close up, and then it's not close up, and it's all in black and white. And what was the reasoning behind that? Because it's phenomenal.
One of the reasons it's in black and white is because we didn't want it to feel like something you would see on TV or on Netflix, because they're all sort of everything's very polished these days. And we shot on like high-end cameras, but we added lots of grain and stuff because we wanted it to feel almost like a home video in one aspect. And we shot the film in what's called 4:3, which is like a square box for most of the film. And the reason behind that is because Steve's world is very small. He's sort of boxed in because he's world hasn't been broadened yet because he hasn't been given opportunity. And then the film does open up to be like a full cinema scope when he does get an opportunity to prove himself. And that was just a sort of artistic choice, if you like, to sort of put you in the mindset of the character.
Yeah, and I think it's such a brilliant artistic choice because you really feel that. And there was one scene in particular that I keep replaying in my head. And it's when Steve goes into the corner shop to pick up the milk, and he can't necessarily process like the change and the fact that he doesn't have enough money to get the milk, and that he could get a smaller size, but then he goes straight for the smallest size because that he doesn't necessarily have that ability to compute that he could go down like just one level. And every time I think about it, because he gets flustered at the end and then goes back, and actually I think what you said was really great. Autism quite often on like the big screen, like Netflix or even in soaps and stuff, can be seen as quite cutesy or childlike. And actually, that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, that is so easily relatable, because he was getting really flustered about the cash, and then he completely forgot about the change, and that scene in and of itself was just something that it really got me, and I loved it. But obviously for you guys, authenticity is such a massive part to Spectrum as a film. And why was it so important for you guys to cast authentically? Because you guys did something quite cool with the casting, didn't you?
Yes, just go back to the shop scene, just because
Yeah.
I find that's an interesting point that you've brought up there. Because when I wrote that scene, on paper, it's extremely boring. Like most TV shows or films wouldn't allow a scene that goes on for like 2 minutes or whatever of a guy buying a pint of milk, because it's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, it's not exciting. But that's the scene that's sort of on the comments on the YouTube, on YouTube. That's the scene that seems to be resonating the most with the autistic community, because it's just their daily occurrence of that thing that seems so minor, but is a struggle every day for people. And I think it's that's probably the sort of proudest moment of the film in a way, because it's a scene that on paper doesn't really stand out of anything, but then it obviously does relate to people, which is really, really amazing. To go back to your question, so yes, the film is authentically cast. Obviously, Steve, who plays the lead, has autism, and there's a scene. One of the first scenes in the film is a like support group, and there's other people who have disabilities in that scene, and they have different disabilities as well. One girl has MS, one guy has Asperger's, another one has autism as well. And they're all authentically cast as well. They are Steve's friends in real life, and some of them I've known for maybe 20 years myself as well.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons to cast authentically is you get an authentic performance. So in that scene, they're acting alongside Wumi Masaku, who's won a BAFTA. She's in like Marvel's Loki and Deadpool and Wolverine. Black Mirror, she's in like 2 episodes of that. Luther, and do you know what I mean? I don't think you would even notice who's the actor and who's not in that scene, because the people in it are so incredible, and that's because of the way we leaned into people's strengths. So, for example, in that scene, nobody's read the script except me, and then what we did on the day is I gave Wumi, who plays the support worker in the scene, I gave her questions that she would have to run the session. And I said to her, basically, your character is just a support worker who's really warm, really understanding, and here's your questions that you prepared for today's session. And within that session, she just asks them, and then the answers come out naturally from people to answer those questions of how they feel they want to. And then obviously, if any questions sort of need to revert back to the plot, then we just sort of push them in the right direction.
Yeah. That's so interesting to know, because when I was watching that scene, and they obviously there's almost like a hyperfixation on superheroes and Marvel, and I actually thought, I was like, oh, whoever like wrote the support worker role, like they really understood their job, because she was so easy to guide them back to the conversation that it was meant to be. And I was like, oh, that was really well written. And so to know that it wasn't really written, it's kind of more like ad lib, is incredible.
That's the theme of the superhero, is the sort of the point of the scene is to sort of highlight that, because it's got superhero themes throughout the film. And one of the reasons is because autism is often referred to as a superpower. And
Yeah.
then so we wanted to play with the idea, what is it to have a superpower? And throughout the film as well, there's moments when Steve seemingly is moving some objects with his mind. And then with the
Yeah.
big climactic moment at the end with the attack, I think it's sort of in there so that people feel he's going to use his powers. But to actually be a superhero isn't about powers or special abilities. It's about somebody that stands up for something when the time comes. That's what a real hero is, you know? And we
Yeah.
wanted to sort of show that in the film, that it's not about any ability. It's about just being somebody that does something at a time.
Yeah. And I love that, because that's not, personally for me, I really dislike the whole, disabilities a superpower thing, because
Yeah.
actually I think it really elevates its ability to a status where actually it's completely unachievable and unattainable. And to kind of take that theme and explore it in actually a very different way, and kind of portray it as like, oh, this could be a superpower, but actually like the biggest thing here is actually to stand up when something isn't going right, and that's not, whether you're disabled or not, that's just like who you are as a person, I think is an incredibly powerful move to make, especially when we're talking about a film that is obviously, that has disability at its heart.
Yeah, and it was important to us as well to never sort of bang on about disability. Steve's never actually it's never actually said that Steve has autism at all. There's
Yeah.
autism as a word is mentioned once, and that's just because another character refers to a superhero having autism. He mentions a guy
Yeah.
called Reed Richards who's from Fantastic Four, and he says, "Do you know he's got autism?" He doesn't say, "Steve, you have autism." It's just in the
Yeah.
air, because everyday life people don't talk about their disability; they just get on with it, So
Yeah.
it's it's kind of up to the audience to sort of see past it, because it's not rammed down your throat all the time. It should just be, this is just another character, and this is how he's going through
uh,
life.
yeah. And actually, going back to the casting, with that, what do you think the impact had on the narrative of the story, with it being cast so authentically? Do you think that it created a more authentic narrative? And like, and with that, what kind of other avenues were you able to explore?
I suppose the narrative would always stay the same, because
Mm-hmm.
if it was somebody who's not got a disability, they in the film, there's a big part of it is Steve's aim is to get a job, basically,
Yeah.
and that could be somebody who's just down on their luck and just, do you know what I mean, and just
Mm-hmm.
having a bad time at the moment. The story would still work the same way. The
Yeah.
reason it makes it different is because of the unique sort of dialogue, I guess. So lots, lots of the, like I said, none of the cast members ever read the script. Basically, the way I wrote it was I wrote the full script, and then I just had
Mm-hmm.
these sort of suggested lines of dialogue to keep the story moving. So then the
Mm-hmm.
way we would work is I would just say, look, in this scene, the point is we need to get across, for example, one scene, Steve's friend's trying to persuade him to wear a suit to go to a job interview.
Yeah.
And with that, the character there, his name's Kyle, and I've known Kyle for like 15 years, and he's obsessed with superheroes and wrestling and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like an encyclopedia, really, of knowledge. So basically, with that scene, I was like, oh, when you're talking about the suit, Kyle, try and refer it back to superheroes in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came up with some incredible lines of dialogue, but
Yeah.
that's just because of leaning into his strengths, and that's the way I think these sort of films um, should be done, because you're using that sort of people's experience and how they express life in their own point of view, rather than trying to make them someone that they're not.
Yeah. And I think that's what this does really, really brilliantly, is that it's the reality of it. It's not like this fluffed up version, and actually, because you were able to lean into people's strengths, you've created something that's like hyper realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, like, in and of itself incredible, and also incredibly jarring, because as you say, like on the big screen we see like autism is shown as something that's quite cutesy and like all quirky, but actually this is kind of the reality of it. And actually, being able to do that, I think, is really impressive. I was just wondering, what has the response to the film been like for you guys? Has it been good, bad, mixed, indifferent? What's it been like?
The response has been unbelievable, really, especially from the autism community. And
Mm-hmm.
so basically, I've done a few podcasts now like this. I did one with a guy who has an autism podcast. It's called Adult
Mm-hmm.
with Autism. And that was a great response because loads of people from his community came over to see it, and then they responded really well, especially for different reasons, like the shop scene, for example.
Yeah.
And then I got lucky and got a shout out on Rob Beckett and Josh Widdicombe's podcast, Parent in Hell. And basically, they got us about 13,000 views in 1 week. So we've nearly hit 15,000 views now. And the
Mm-hmm.
response from that is amazing because obviously their audience are typically going to be parents. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are responding in such an incredible way of like, oh yeah, my son's got autism, or my brother's got autism, my dad's got autism, my aunt, and they're sort of seeing things and where they can relate to it, like
Yeah.
just little nuances, or they feel inspired as well because I suppose it's an inspirational story because um, Steve just himself leading this film where he's in every single scene for half an hour and
Mm-hmm.
he does an incredible performance, and it's because he sort of grew in confidence as we were making it. Like
Yeah.
there's a big scene at the end when he has to intimidate this terrifying guy that's been attacking this woman, and when he goes towards him and he's shouting, he's swearing, he's aggressive towards him, it's incredible, really. Do you know, he's not an
Mm-hmm.
actor, he hasn't trained as an actor. And that was a real sort of turning point when we was making that scene, because I was quite nervous about doing that because that scene cost us pretty much all of our budget because it's got a police car, it's got like 5 actors, shot at night
uh,
with a big location. And I was thinking, if he doesn't pull this off, it's gonna really just go downhill. Like you got to the climax and then it just fails
yeah.
in performance. But with that scene, when we were just setting up some lights and stuff, I told Steve the scene, and before any other actors or anything arrived, I was just setting something up in the corner, and then I heard him outside rehearsing on his own. He was just doing this scene 10 times on his own, and
Yeah.
when he was doing that, I just knew that he had sort of become an actor in that moment because he knew how important it was for the film, and he'd put it on
Mm-hmm.
himself to be like, okay, I need to make sure this is right. And it just completely relaxed me after seeing him doing rehearsals on his own, because it was like, okay, he's got this. It was a really proud moment.
Yeah. And what I love about this is Steve is obviously your brother,
Hmm.
and that you've grown up with Steve your whole life. And actually, to talk about you, what was it like for you growing up with Steve as your brother who has autism? What
Hmm.
was that experience of childhood like for you, being
Um,
disability adjacent?
I suppose because we're only like 4 years apart, sort of
Mm.
growing up in sort of, we shared a room until we were like 25, or until I was like 25. I'm 38 now, and then just like a small council flat in East London, and
Mm-hmm.
so growing up as teenagers, it was probably like most teenagers' brothers who are sharing a room. It's quite tense at times, and
Yeah.
arguments and whatever else that happens. So there was that, obvious, which is kind of just normal place, I guess. And I think part
Mm-hmm.
of it would have been sort of frustrations, I guess, because things were more difficult for him,
Mm-hmm.
which means it kind of, you're sort of in that together in that sense. But
Yeah.
then once we sort of grew as adults, we came even closer. Sort of once we were sort of 18 to going forward, we got even
Mm-hmm.
more closer, I think, because it sort of leveled out a bit more, and we both sort of grew up at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, and now I see it as, I don't really think about it too much.
Yeah.
I don't think of, oh yeah, my brother's got a disability. I just,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've sort of gone past ever thinking about that. But I think the only time I do is, for example, if we're out socially and I see him maybe talking to somebody, a stranger, somebody new, and
Yeah.
I kind of would sort of keep an eye on the situation because sometimes people can be a bit dismissive. So I kind of keep an eye
Mm-hmm.
on it like that, I guess. But yeah, other than that, like, do you know what I mean? It's just, you just get on with your existence, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think is so great about this film, is that it's, like I said, it's jarring and like, you're like, grainy is the like right word that I would use for it, and yet also fantastic all at once. But it's not showy offy. It's not like, oh, I've pulled a magic rabbit out my hat, look at me. It's like, no, this is like a real life thing and real life experience. And I think that that's what's so brilliant about it, is that it is so real.
Hmm.
And like, there's no like fluff, if you know what I mean. Like, well, you're a director, so you kind of get what I was saying, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like not. I'm not a director. I'm just someone who likes to chat a lot.
Well, I think fluff is a good word for it, because often people are it's a business, right? So on TV and
Mm,
stuff, you have to try and get as broad as an audience as possible. So
yeah.
sort of to do certain scenes are sort of considered risky, because they could either be seen as too violent, they could be seen as
Hmm.
too um, just too long sometimes. Like in our film, we've got a
Yeah.
scene where like an aunt just sort of tells a 1.5 minute story, which is just a funny story, and it's got nothing to do with the storyline. You know, it's
Hmm.
just part of that is just showing sort of warmth on in Steve's life, but
Yeah.
it doesn't push the story along at all. Where most
Hmm.
things wouldn't do that, because you have to keep moving. You know, you have to keep going, keep going. But
Yeah.
that was kind of part of it, where we wanted to make it feel real as possible. And in real life, it isn't all murders and mysteries and everything. You know, it is
Yeah.
somebody just having a cup of tea and telling a funny story that happened to him that day. You know, and
Hmm.
yeah, we wanted to. One of the influences was the sitcom Royal Family, just because
Oh
we
my god,
wanted
my
that.
favorite.
Yeah, we just wanted that realism. You know, like sometimes
Hmm.
in Royal Family, sometimes they have just silence for 30 seconds when they watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or
Yeah.
whatever. Do you know what I mean? And we wanted to sort of incorporate that.
Yeah. And actually, now that you said that, I can so see like that influence, particularly in that scene that you were just talking about, where they're like having a cup of tea and she's talking about like how she walked into someone's house or something.
Yeah,
And actually, it's so true. It's like real life warmth, and like kind of actually what you said about the shopkeeper scene as well, is that like the timing, it isn't like super like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, like obviously keep your attention flowing and whatever. But
Mhm.
actually, it's kind of showing that real life 365 view, which I think is just brilliant
Yeah,
about this whole thing.
someone said to me, it's a hangout movie, which means you're just hanging out with these people for half an hour, you know. And it's
Yeah.
got elements of that. Like obviously, it's got a lot of sort of highly concept stuff as well, in terms of like
Yeah.
sort of Marvel concepts and what superheroes are and
Hmm.
things like that. It's got a lot of things like that going for it as well. But there's an element of it is we're just spending some time with this guy, you know.
Yeah. And that's what I think I love about it, is that it's like you're spending some time kind of learning this other side of the like world that you probably would never delve into had you not just sat down and watched this for, what's it, like half an hour,
No,
37 minutes
yeah,
or something. Yeah. And that's what I think I really like about it, because it's not in your face. And I don't mean that as like a negative. I mean that as like a really brilliant positive, because it kind of gets under your skin. Like, I haven't been able to stop thinking of it's specifically the change. I have not been not able to think about the change for like all day, because I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, like, what about this experience, and what would happen here, and like, oh, and what about this, and like, oh, should you handle this better, and how would you handle this situation? And because it's real life, you can apply it to real life situations.
hmm
And I guess, is that something that you wanted to get out of the film, is that it was so applicable to real life that viewers could see it and maybe understand your brother's perspective of the world better, but also autism as a whole better.
Yeah, like when on our sort of tagline of the film, it's we all have worth regardless of where we are on the spectrum, and
Hmm.
that was kind of the sort of aim, really, is to sort
Yeah.
of show um, that sometimes people with disabilities can just be sort of disregarded before they've even had a chance, and that's a big
Hmm.
running theme throughout the film as well. Basically, there's a scene in it when Steve goes for a job interview, and before he's entered the room, he's already sort of been dismissed as
Yeah.
terrible candidate. And in that scene, it was important for us that if you actually listen to what Steve's saying while he's being ignored, he's actually doing a really good job interview. And that's on
Yeah.
purpose to say, look, he should get the job because he's pulling off the interview. He's showing all his
Mm-hmm.
credentials and saying how much experience he's got and everything like that. But then he's written off before given an opportunity, and that was sort of taken from life as well. Like Steve has had a job now. He worked as a cleaner at West Ham Football Ground for many years, and
Mm-hmm.
before that, it did feel like he was just sort of going around in circles of not be given that chance, you know. And
Yeah.
we wanted to sort of highlight that. But yeah, it was always a sort of mission to. I think a film should be two things really. It should be first of all entertaining because that's why you
Yeah.
push play in the first place, and secondly, you should take something away with you. You know, you should feel like you've learnt something, or maybe you can see yourself in a character, or you might think, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
next time a situation like that comes about my way, or maybe I'll handle that differently." Because um, yeah, it should just sort of sit with you for a while.
Yeah. When you were like writing Spectrum and like kind of going through the motions of the storytelling and that kind of stuff, at any point did you seek like outside counsel from your brother or from like the wider autistic community?
No, so basically it was tricky really because what happened was I
Mm-hmm.
obviously wrote the film, and anybody that sort of made a film before, it's such a commitment, and if you do decide to sort of go with a project that you've got as an idea, once it's sort of locked in, you kind of have no choice but to go and make it. But at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't told Steve that we were going to make it yet. You know what I mean? So
Uh-huh.
I kind of put myself in the corner of like, okay, if Steve doesn't want to do it, we just don't do it, you know?
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't have felt right to sort of cast it because
Mm-hmm.
lots of the sort of reference points in the film is because of Steve's own experience and my sort of viewpoint of watching Steve and how he's handled situations over the years, you know?
Yeah.
So, and even like just the way the environment is. So in the film, the flat is where I grew up. It is Steve's real flat where he lives with my
Uh-huh.
mum and stepdad, and the mum in the film also is our mum. So, and that kind of happened by mistake as well because the way it happened was I did a screen test with Steve just to see how he feels on camera, just to get a feel of it.
Yeah.
And when we just did that sort of rehearsal, I just got my mum, who was in the other room, just to act out the scene. She's not an actor. And then when I pieced that together, it was like, oh, okay, you need to be in it as well now because
Mm-hmm.
it just feels natural, you know, because the way they bounce off each other is how they interact, or it's a heightened version of how they
Uh-huh.
interact in real life.
Yeah.
And that's just, once it was working, it was like, okay, this is just the route we have to take, you know? And that's why the aunt in the film that tells that funny story, she is our real aunt, and she did do
Uh-huh.
that in real life. And it's just like, okay, tell that funny story that happened once, you know? And all of
Uh-huh.
those pulling from experience
Mm-hmm.
was all important for this project because it just keeps that authenticity, because it is, lots of it is from
Yeah.
reality, you know?
Yeah. I really, really enjoy it. Like, I think it's such a brilliant representation of like autism in real life. And I say that as someone who works heavily within like autism and learning disabilities outside of doing this podcast. Like my actual like real life job that pays me money is
Yeah,
working with adults who have autism and learning disabilities.
amazing.
And so when I watched it today, I was captivated because I know Steve. I don't
Yeah,
obviously know Steve, but
yeah,
like
yeah, I see.
I know Steve, and like I have worked with people who've had those same experiences, and that's probably why the shop thing really like it really struck a chord with me because I've been in that situation. I've been the support worker who has helped someone in that situation who forgot about the change or just fumbled it a bit and just got super stressed over that situation because that's like how they handle the world. And I just thought for a film to be so openly blunt about what the reality is fantastic because actually it is quite blunt.
Hmm.
And is that on purpose?
Um, it's just the natural way to do it for me, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
it, for me, there's no other way to tell the story because
Yeah.
otherwise it's like, it's that classic thing of write what you know, right? And
Yeah.
this is what I know because has been my existence, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of from that really. It's just I heard a quote from like a director before. I think it was David Fincher, who's made like The Social Network and Fight Club and stuff. And I
Yeah.
think he said something like, "There's two ways to make the film: the wrong way or the right way." And that's just
Yeah.
the way I see it. This is just the way
Mhm.
this is, and there's no sort of two ways about it. This is just this is it. You know what I mean? Like if someone came along and was like, "Oh no, we want to change this to be even in color," it would be like, really, like this is the way it's meant to be.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I think I honestly, I really, really would implore anybody who listens to this podcast to go and check it out, because I think it's one of those watches that will just stay with you. And like, it will stay with you for a whole, like, varying host of different reasons. Like, for me, it's because I have been in that situation with someone experiencing that situation, or, I can relate to it a lot. And I think it's a really brilliant, like, representation. But when it comes to casting and the way that you kind of guided your actors through the scenes, what would be your advice to other creators who want to make some form of inclusive stories like Spectrum? What would be like the top three pieces of advice that you would give people?
I suppose first is to listen to
Mm-hmm.
what people have to say from their experience. Don't assume that people are going to be struggling with certain things. Listen
Yeah.
and observe. Just see how things are slightly different to people, how people do things.
Yeah.
I'd say lean into people's strengths. If
Mm-hmm.
somebody, do you know what I mean? Like I said, with Carl, he's got an encyclopedic knowledge about superheroes, so we can play on that. You know what I mean? You can
Yeah.
use that. You can use like just different aspects of people's strengths. I think don't see the negatives, see the positives, and then you'll get the
Mm-hmm.
best out of people. And that goes across the board with just working with normal actors.
Yeah.
The reason a film's good is not because you chose necessarily a good actor. You've chose an actor to be good for that particular part.
Yeah.
So it's just good casting. It all comes down to good casting. I think
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't cast Leonardo DiCaprio to ever be in this film because he's not the right guy to be in this film. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's do you know what I mean? Why would you? You know?
Yeah.
But that's because he's comes from a different experience. But he's, do you know what I mean, good for
Uh-huh.
other things. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's
Like,
true.
it's the same with like when you work with anybody, I guess. Like
Mm-hmm.
even if you're just employing somebody to work in Sainsbury's, do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? You're employing on the person,
Yeah,
not
so true.
necessarily because of their skill set. It's more like, oh, they've got something maybe unique or different, which is great.
Yeah. From doing Spectrum, has it made like you want to delve into more accessible stories?
Yeah, so with the half an hour film, we're trying
Mhm.
to open it up to become a feature film now,
Oh
where we
wow.
will explore some of the other characters. So
Mhm.
Jade, who's in the film, who's in the support group, she has MS,
Yeah.
and she's probably the most positive person you could ever meet in your life. She's unbelievable,
Yeah.
and so we want to delve into her story as well and
Mhm.
show how it's never sort of stopped her in any way,
Mhm.
and it'll be a very sort of positive story.
Yeah.
Like she's in a long-term relationship. She's does drama clubs. She
Mhm.
is a sort of activist, really. Like if there's any sort
Yeah.
of thing going on, she fights for people, and I think she's got a great story to tell like that. Um,
Mhm.
and also, we're looking to explore Carl's story as well, who's in the
Yeah.
film, because Carl's an interesting one where he had a hit and run when he was 17, and
Oh
he
wow.
was in a coma for 2 months. And from that, Carl sort of sees that as his huge sort of fork in the road.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really interesting to sort of explore that sort of side of things. Which I've wrote a treatment for it currently to make it extend it into a
Uh-huh.
feature, and hopefully we're going to find some money to sort of try and make that happen,
Yeah.
because essentially the film currently cost about 5 or 6 thousand to make. But I paid for that
Mhm.
myself because my grandmother died, and it was
Uh-huh.
either go on a holiday or make a movie, so we did that.
Uh-huh.
And now, do you know what I mean? I can't sort of fund it myself in that sense. So
Yeah.
we're looking to, and it'll be the half an hour film that we've already got re-edited to also incorporate other people's stories who are already been established within the film. And
Yeah.
it explores different disabilities at the same time, you know. So it sort of would be three disabilities with different perspectives, all happening at once.
I honestly think that would be incredible, particularly with the story about MS, because I really like how it's almost like flipping it on its head. You
Yeah,
know, this idea that what the outside perceives as a tragedy actually is the complete opposite. And I really, really, really enjoyed watching Spectrum. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm so glad that we've had this conversation because I want other people to go and watch it because I think it's just such a brilliant real life representation of what it is to be in and of the world of autism, particularly here in the UK. And I thought it was brilliant. So I want you to get all the money to make it because I think it would be so good. But I'm gonna kind of pull this to a close a little bit because Rick, I think it's been such a fab chat and I've loved hearing about it and how you worked with the actors and how you wrote it as well, because I think the way that you kind of told people that this is the way the scene was, you know, the journey the scene needed to go on, but let people kind of ad lib is such a fab way of doing it. And because of all of this, I don't want to over saturate it because I've loved this. I've loved this chat. I think it's been great. But what was your favorite bit of Spectrum? What was your favorite moment?
It's a funny one because the film took like 8 days to shoot. We shot the whole thing in 8 days, but we sort of did a scene per month because of just scheduling of my time, the guy that I shot it with's time, Steve's time. Getting people together is probably the hardest part of the whole process. And when we shot the last scene we actually shot was just it's the pub scene. There's a pub scene with like a karaoke sequence, which is they're singing Red Wine from UB40. And that was the last night we did. And that was amazing because all the extras in that are like friends and family and stuff. And it's just a big old knees up, you know, like I put money behind the bar, everyone was having a good old drink. And then we did big old karaoke scene with Steve and like a love interest within the film. And then when we finished that, it was kind of sad, you know, because it's over. It's like, oh, now what do we do next week? You know, like piece it together with the edit, which is fun but also exhausting. And then my friend who shot the film with me, he texted me a few days later and was like, I feel really down because it's over. Can't we just carry on, you know? So it's a kind of a bittersweet thing, you know, like probably the funniest thing was making that scene in the pub with everybody, having a good time. But then 2 minutes later, you've got to go home and get on with your life. So yeah, it's a funny one.
Oh, Rick, well, I am so glad we've had this chat. I love Spectrum and I really, really hope that you guys can find investors to make it a longer film because I think it would be absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've absolutely loved it.
Oh, me too. It's been fun.